small businesses. But generally speaking, minority businesses, the number one issue is access to capital. And so we have different lending programs under the Small Business Administration. We offer working capital in the form of 7(a) loans or commercial lending where we lend you up to $25 million to buy a building, to buy equipment, and then working capital to pay payroll, to make your payroll, or any other expansion. So it is important for, and so the important part of this program is that the banks, the big banks, are not lending to small businesses because it's not profitable. You know, they're looking for that $50 million loan, for that 25, for $2 million. And when we look at the portfolio of the type of lending that Latinos and Blacks, women apply for, is between $10,000 to $250,000, not higher than that. And so you see a vacuum of those smaller loans with the big banks. So what we do is we use the power and the leverage of the federal government. We incentivize community banks in our community to lend to small businesses by guaranteeing 80% of your loan.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So there should be no excuse for any bank in our community not to lend to, you know, worthy individuals. We're not saying, oh, you must make a loan to this person. No, they have to prove themselves. They have to put together a business plan. They have to go to the bank and, you know, discuss the application. What we have done, we have created a national network of small business development centers. In New York, we have in Jamaica Avenue a Women Business Center. We have in Brooklyn College a Small Business Development Center. At Pace University, another Small Business Development Center. At LaGuardia, at York.
Wow.
So we have an entire network of small business development centers where you can go and participate in some of the workshops where you could say, look, I have this idea, I want to start up a business. They will take you
Through the steps.
through all the steps
Wow.
that you need to have in order to be able to apply for a loan. And so they will provide you with counseling and capacity building. And then to tackle the issue of poverty, when we talk about poverty, is the feminization of poverty. Women, basically, are the ones that are very low income, who has basically no ability to go and apply for a loan. So we created a micro loan program that lends from $500 to $50,000. So when you look at those hair salons, probably that owner had been able to get a micro loan program. And so my committee is one of the most bipartisan committees, because when it comes to small business issue, there's no
Everybody
Republican or Democratic approach to it. You know, we come together. My committee has been one of the most productive and effective in passing bipartisan legislation. Just 2 weeks ago, we passed maybe 6 bills. Prior to that, another set of 11 bills with veterans, to help veterans that are coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, so that we provide a tool for them to be able, they come, you know, veterans of all people, they have a lot of skills. So how can they put that to work? And so we help them. We created a veterans outreach program just for veterans. And then I created, my gosh, maybe 14 years ago, a women's procurement program that will require the federal government to provide 5% of all the contracting money from the federal government. The federal government spent $500 billion in procurement. So the federal government buys everything, from paper clips to coffee for the Department of Defense, for the troops, okay, auto parts, plane parts. So we have small businesses and women. So what I did through this women procurement program is to provide a level playing field for women who are in business, whether it is on IT, agriculture, whatever, that they have an opportunity to compete for those federal dollars. And the program is doing quite well. So we're trying to empower women and to empower small businesses, Latino businesses. And we are doing all kind of roundtables in Washington where we bring people from our own district in the area of tech. I believe now in October, I'm doing a hearing where we're going to bring the executive of Facebook, Google, all these high-tech companies, because we want to make sure that there is a level playing field, that small businesses could use their space to do business. Amazon.
It seems like the news needs to focus on your committee more, because in the age of where it's either your left or your right, talking about these important programs, it seems to me would be a good direction to kind of take the country in.
Right.
And just moving on to the next question, as you were talking about women in business particularly, but as the first Puerto Rican woman in Congress, what advice would you have for young women that want to pursue their dreams and whatever it may be? What, as you were mentioning, your father had a tough road where he was at, and then you kind of carried that torch on and have had.
And it wasn't easy, right?
So what advice do you give to young women that want to pursue whatever they may be wanting to pursue?
First, to believe in yourself.
Amen.
Because if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you,
That's true.
right? No one else will feel that they could invest in you. So believe in yourself and then set goals. This is what I want to do. When I was growing up in Puerto Rico, I wanted to be a teacher. But then I became a college professor. And then from there, I came to New York, and after I graduated and I went back, I taught at the University of Puerto Rico 5 years. Then I came back to New York. I went to Hunter College for maybe 2 years, and I was an adjunct professor there. And every time the students kept asking me, why don't you run for office? I said, oh no, that is not for me. I just want to challenge you to think and to be analytical about opportunities and the world and this and that. And then I went to work for the government of Puerto Rico, and I asked the question, why is it that given the numbers of Puerto Ricans in New York, Puerto Ricans are invisible politically? And so I posed the questions to some of my friends, and they say, well, yes, you got the numbers, but they don't vote. And I said, well, we need to address that. So that's the issue. The issue is when you see something, you fix it. Yeah, you ask why. And then when you got an answer, you have to decide whether you want to be the agent of change. At that point, when they told me they are not registered to vote, and I said, how could that be possible? Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico has the highest participation in elections in the Western Hemisphere. Back in 1985, when I went to work for the governor of Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico, the electoral participation was 89%.
Wow, that's impressive.
Here in New York, it was,
20%
20% back then. So what did when the governor of Puerto Rico asked me to be the head of the offices here in New York, I said to him, what about before I accept the position, if I put together an agenda that I called it the national agenda for Puerto Ricans? What about if you support my agenda? If you do, then I will come on board. I said to him, because by then, the function of the office of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico in the United States was to provide Puerto Ricans with social services or connect Puerto Ricans with agencies here. I said to the governor, that is the wrong approach. We need to teach the Puerto Ricans here in New York how to fish and let them, right, bring the food to the table. How do you do that? By empowering Puerto Ricans in New York so that they could flex their political muscle, so that they could go and say to elected officials, I am a Puerto Rican and I am a voter and I am your constituent. These are our issues. And so I designed one of the most effective voter registration campaigns among Puerto Ricans, Atrévete, Dare To. We registered back in from 85 to 89, 250,000 Puerto Ricans. And it changed the political landscape in New York and in Chicago and in Connecticut. 3 places where we launched Atrévete, Dare To, register to vote.
It's incredible. I want to just say, I want to commend you on the work that you're doing with the small businesses, because I feel like that's going to combat wealth disparity so much, because so many people have ambitions, but they don't know how to get started.
Right.
They don't know how to tap into the resources that exist. They think that they don't exist.
Right.
So getting the word out there is so important. And I also want to just commend you on all the work that you're doing, especially targeting women, because obviously there's a lot of times where women are kind of just behind in the overall landscape of things. And it's kind of like a game of catch up all the time.
Right.
So it's incredible that you're doing that work. And all the work that you've done in the Puerto Rican community as well, bringing them to the forefront and bringing them really into the fold as far as, developing that strength and having them know that they do have power in politics if they can kind of, get more involved. And I think a lot of people in today's world, they've very much lost hope in politics.
Right.
And there has to be like a resurgence for people to understand that there is power in it and people do have to get involved. And just kind of as a follow-up question to all of that, to encompassing all these things, aside from starting businesses and getting involved politically, people are taking different avenues to get ahead in life. Right now, as far as women are concerned, there's a lot of talk about legalizing sex work. And I just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts on the issue and kind of get a feel for what you thought about that.
Well, look, it's an issue that really is, especially for our community that is more conservative when it comes to those issues. But then on the other hand, how do we protect women in their line of work? How do we, not only in terms of safety, but healthy, health-wise.
Mental health.
And so if we don't formalize a way for them to be able to get the information that will empower themselves, then it could be more disastrous. It could be more problematic for those who are in that type of, business, if you want to call it that way.
Do you think that legalizing sex work may send the wrong message to young girls?
I think that it's not the wrong or right message. No, I think that what we need to do as a society is to talk to our girls very early on, is to show them that there is a way for them to dream about being that person that they want to be, So it's how can we, through a solid school system, I believe that if we provide every single opportunity for those little girls to be able to develop themselves, to realize their full potential, we will not be discussing these
Having that,
issues.
I agree.
Okay? So our fight has to be that a zip code should not define
Where you go
the
to college.
quality of education that a child is going to get. That is our fight.
I think that's such a beautiful answer, and it's very true on so many levels, and I don't think people realize how early on we need to get into these young, not just girls either, young children's minds and start preparing
It's
them.
just from where they are in their
Absolutely.
wombs, in their
Absolutely.
wombs. Look, the kind of the medical attention and access to medical services, it will define the health of that little girl or that little boy. And it was at this vigil in Chinatown, where 4 people were
Yes.
killed, homeless people in one of the wealthiest cities in the world. How could we be surrounded by luxury condos and then you have people with no hope, with schools that are crumbling? That is not. And so the discussion has to be the will for our government to invest in human capital, to invest in that little child.
So, do you have another question?
I don't. I want to thank you, Congresswoman, again
Thank you.
for having us. I think the conversation was amazing. Just knowing your history, knowing who you are, just as someone who's been involved in politics in this community, seeing that history sort of unfold here as you explain how you've been involved. I think we always kind of like to end by just if you want to let our viewers know of any projects that you're working on. I know you have something related to NYCHA bill that you have.
Oh, yeah, well.
It's a big issue that's going on, but if there's anything that specifically to NYCHA if you want to talk about that you're working on, because I think that for me personally, I don't live in NYCHA, but I care about the NYCHA community because I know there's a lot going on with NYCHA at the moment.
Well, the number is the lack of affordable housing is the #1 issue.
Yes.
You middle class, low income, moderate, most vulnerable is the lack of affordability when it comes to housing. And then you have all this rezoning going on. Well, it has proven that it's not enough, or it has proven that it has been poorly
Someone told me the other day it's like trying to put a square into a circle,
yeah,
into a
right.
round hole.
The need is so big, it's so huge. And so what we are seeing these days is the fruit of public policy in New York City when it comes to housing, driven by developers rather than by the community, rather by community needs. And then we need to take money out of politics so that you're not afraid that by taking a public position on certain issues, you're going to be, castigated. You are going to be punished. And so that is a #1 issue, that we need to get dirty politics, dirty money out of politics in Washington, here in New York City, and in New York State. The other issue is, look, when we look at NYCHA, 600,000 families live in public housing. And when I started out 27 years ago, I was always proud, being the only member from the New York delegation to sit on the public housing subcommittee, and always being proud of how NYCHA and the chairman of NYCHA was introduced in every single hearing. It was the envy of every other Congress member sitting in that committee room. And look at the conditions today. When the city stopped providing the resources, the state built public housing in New York, but never provided the subsidies for the operation and capital funding to keep. You cannot build public housing and
just
leave it
leave it
there
there, right.
and not reinvest to modernize it. And look at today, it's
gonna
$32
deteriorate.
billion that we need. So what I did last week, I introduced legislation that will declare a national public housing emergency.
Oh, wow.
And it will request from the federal government to allocate $70 billion nationwide, because NYCHA is the largest public housing development in the nation. We will stand to gain $32 billion out of that $70 billion. So we cannot let NYCHA shut down. We need to make every effort to modernize public housing in our nation. Because the question is, where people, working families, are going to go in a city like New York that is so expensive. A studio in New York, here in Williamsburg, how much you have to pay?
$2,000 to $3,000
Yeah.
for
So,
a studio.
are we going to let public housing go? No,
No,
I don't
yeah.
think so. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. It's a great way to end because that is the #1 issue that's going on. So we appreciate it, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
a pleasure.
you. Thank you.
Letting
Thank you
us
so
be
much.
here and
Yeah, sure.
taking part in this. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Education, education, education.
Indeed.
People need to know.